Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to have a disposition of one of the chapters that I intend to talk about in one of our books that has to do with um, more like understanding the racial stigmatization of the black man. Because it's one of the chapters that we intend to talk about in our book that is upcoming, addressing racial injustices that have to do with the black man because of the tradition in terms of the different compromise that have been imputed upon him by history, and therefore creating an imbalance of sorts in terms of how he needs to redeem himself, in terms of asserting himself as a human being in terms of equal status. Last time I was telling you about the fact that for a long time in the USA, for probably over 400 years, they had designated a human being, especially a black man, for being 3/4 of a human being. Needless to mention that people like Roosevelt came out and argued and pronounced themselves and said the freedom that they had given the black man by way of freedom of slavery was the fact that they had actually, and we're talking about the white man, they had actually helped him to become a lesser beast. Their argument was that they had propounded him, they had actually taken him from the bushes and transformed him into a lesser beast. And that is something that they were celebrating. I also remember that the same statement was said by Adolf Hitler at the time when Jesse Owens had actually won the Olympics, and people were like, why? Adolf was like, why are people celebrating this black guy who was actually won? And it was like, it should actually be the white man who should be celebrated because of transforming a beast into a human, to beat a human in terms of that component. No wonder people like Friedrich Engel also, who is actually German, I'm here in German so I can respectfully say that, also made that same allegation that the black man has, for all intents and purposes, lacks the harmonization that makes him a human being, a full human being. In fact, his argument was that a black man is more like a person who was a cannibal, because they argued that black people were cannibals by nature. Obviously, almost all these statements have been found to be untrue because of the affirmation that the black man has actually found himself right now. So these are what we call stereotypes that have been imputed by different people, even scholars, intellectual scholars, and presidents, and so there's a system that tends to propound or promote institutionalized racialism against the black man because of the color of their skin. But we're thankful to people like Malcolm X and people like Dr. Khalid Mohammed, people like Reverend Jesse Jackson, people like Minister Louis Farrakhan, people like Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who have actually come out propound and they've asserted themselves. I think it was Jesse Jackson who said, I was born in the slums, but the slums were not born in me. On the other hand, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said that he was praying for a time where people are not going to be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. So almost all these things have resonated in terms of understanding the stigma that has imputed upon the black man. So there's a call upon us, black people, to redeem ourselves, to find ourselves in terms of blending ourselves with what makes us human beings. Perhaps the danger we have is whether or not the misfortunes that Africa may find itself today have a lot to do with perhaps what the individualism of Africanism is, or perhaps has to do with a deliberate frustration by other powers that may be. That's a question of debate. But I would like to argue that there are those who argue and say culturalism has also had an impact in terms of also attitudeism, in terms of what the black man is today. But that notwithstanding, I'll also try to address the imbalances that have been propounded by deliberate attempts to stigmatize and cause the black man to become a slave forever. I'll give a story of a man they used to call Willie Lynch. Willie Lynch was a man who was in the Caribbean, and one time he wrote, you have probably heard of Willie Lynch letters, and there was a time when the slaves in America were so revoltous that they were actually, fighting against their masters. And so these guys sought for remedy. How do you guys in Caribbean do? How do you manage? How do you put them in order? And Willie Lynch wrote letters and tried to teach them how they do this thing. And he told them that, so the word lynch, it was his second name. So the lynch gained that etymology in dictionary purposes, not because it came out as lynch, but because of his diabolical methods of how he was approaching, how he was treating the black man. And one of the things he says, you get the black man, the nigger, like you used to call him, tie the nigger on one side of a horse, his hand on one side of a horse, facing opposite direction, one leg on one side of a horse, facing opposite direction. Do that on the right hand, left hand as well, and leg, and then set fire under his private parts, tear his skin off, beat the horse so bad that they can tear this man into pieces. The idea is that do it before the black niggers, do it before the children and the women. Set dogs so the dogs can go and bite off the women's private parts and the breasts. Do it in front of these niggers and put the fear of God in them so that they become useful for future generation. Take the mind, keep the body. The argument is that when you remove the mind, the righteous mind, the idea is that so that you can cause them to be, donkeys of sorts or horses of sorts. You've removed the ability to think. No wonder it took them over 400 years for the black man to be given the opportunity to learn and write. So it was an offense for a black man to read and write. So these are components that we have to understand, that the stigmatization, the deliberate institutionalized racism that has been propounded ideologically in the minds of people to have this bias against the black man. In spite of the so many thrivings and so many excellent things that the black man has asserted himself, I can mention over 100 black people who have excelled, and by mentioning 100, I'm talking about the cream of the cream, what they call the sui generis, who have excelled in almost all those different phenomena, and those we will discuss those in the book. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's just a small impact of where we're coming from to draw the ideological perspective of what the world thinks or takes to a white man or a black man to be for that purpose. And I'm not making an advocacy in terms of black supremacy or white supremacy. No, I'm just talking about the idea that we are inextricably bound. Like Dr. King said, we are blended together and we are woven together like webs that are designed to excel and to become better in everything that we do. So find our books at lubogo.org and suegenerislawup.com. God bless you and thank you for your attention. My name is Isaac C.